Rick and Morty is a show that transcends the boundaries of the sci-fi genre. What makes it so powerful is how it resonates with our own reality. Its masterful world building is epitomized by the meta nature of its universe, challenging its own canon and exploring poignant themes that invite us to look beyond the surface. Among these powerful themes is the show's portrayal of the Citadel of Ricks, where infinite Ricks and Mortys attempt to coexist, and the endless possibilities of their personalities and relationships become manifest.
Yeah, most timelines have a Rick, and most Ricks have a Morty. This place is a real who's who of who's you and me.
The Citadel serves as a mirror to our world, reflecting the complex dynamics of our own political landscape. In this multiverse microcosm, we witness power struggles, social hierarchies, and, most disturbingly, the rise of populism.
A cocky Morty can lead to some big problems.
Ironically, it's Rick's nihilistic rebelliousness that sets the stage for both the rise and fall of the Citadel, as well as the ascent of Evil Morty. As a character who consistently rejects authority and societal norms, Rick inadvertently fosters the perfect environment for all of those developments to unfold. Because although the Citadel is built on the very idea of resisting conformity, it ultimately succumbs to the same issues that plague any other society. Rick's independent spirit, initially seen as a strength, soon reveals itself as a double-edged sword. His rejection of authority and desire for autonomy foster an environment in which the Citadel's political structure becomes vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation.
Gentlemen, I think we can all agree on one thing. Well, came out as two things, but you get the idea. You guys finished?
Evil Morty capitalizes on this dichotomy, using Rick's defiance as a catalyst for his own rise to power. He exploits the disillusionment and discontent among the Citadel's inhabitants to forge a new political order, unifying them under his rule. As Evil Morty's influence grows, so too does the very authoritarian regime that Ricks so vehemently oppose. In this video, we'll analyze the show's unique take on hierarchy, status, and power, and study the portrayal of Evil Morty as a dangerous, cunning populist, while drawing on the real-life political, philosophical, and economic inspirations of the Citadel's world. Spoilers will follow. This is The Invisible Lens. The Citadel of Ricks is a trans-dimensional city-state created as a sanctuary for Ricks and Mortys from infinite realities. The Citadel was created after a peace treaty between our Rick, Rick C-137, and a congregation of other Ricks. The central idea behind the Citadel was to offer an escape from oppressive governments and a safe harbor from Rick's numerous enemies, allowing Ricks to live independently and free from external control. But ironically, the Citadel eventually develops its own distinct forms of government. Here, the show is subtly answering the philosophical question Robert Nozick poses in Anarchy, State, and Utopia. If you abolished all government, would a government eventually re-emerge? It also brings to mind the story of America's founding fathers, a band of rebellious independent people who were deeply skeptical of a large central government, and, well, look what their work eventually turned into.
Of all the Ricks in the central finite curve, you're the malcontent, the rogue. I'm the Rick, And so were the rest of you before you formed this stupid alliance. You wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me.
With the construction of the Citadel, Rick C-137 and the Council of Ricks also built what became known as the Central Finite Curve, a machine below the Citadel that walls off any universe in which a Rick isn't the dominant life force. It's also assumed that Rick C-137 built the curve to lock up Rick Prime, who killed our Rick's original family. Having failed in this quest, our Rick tracks down Rick Prime's original universe, but rather than locating his archenemy, he becomes attached to Morty Prime, who becomes our Morty.
Oh man! Leave my Morty out of this! You lost the right to have a say in these things when you refused to join the council.
Wait, what about Jerry?
In its early stages, the Citadel is governed by the Council of Ricks, a body composed of notable Ricks from various dimensions. This council was responsible for overseeing day-to-day operations and maintaining order within the Citadel. However, after a conflict with our Rick that leads to the Citadel's partial destruction, control fully shifts to an enigmatic shadow council composed of 9 industry titans, portrayed as crony capitalists, who exploit the stratified structure of their society to gain power in a corrupt, interdependent relationship with the government.
We were saying, President Morty, that we don't care who sits in that seat. A Rick, a Morty, a goddamn Jerry, doesn't matter. We've been running the Citadel since before the council, and you'll find that we're still running it now.
Does he really speak for everyone here?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to be clear. Raise your hand if he speaks for you.
The Citadel also serves as a permanent residence for countless Ricks and Mortys, who form a complex society within its confines. It's during this time that the Citadel undergoes another significant transformation in its political landscape, where it becomes more democratic and holds elections, but the seeds for a populist and authoritarian overthrow are also sown. That overthrow comes about in the form of President Morty, aka Evil Morty.
Maybe you should find a little faith, young man.
Following the events of the Rick Shank redemption, Evil Morty implements a series of purges against the Shadow Council and other political opponents, consolidating power and transforming the Citadel into an authoritarian regime.
New department, new codes, new Citadel.
The emergence of this new form of government in the Citadel is a testament to the irony that it was initially established to escape from government control. Then, of course, the Citadel meets its latest demise when Evil Morty triggers a chain reaction that explodes it, killing almost all Ricks and the majority of Mortys residing there. The Citadel explodes as Evil Morty breaks through the Central Finite Curve, although the city of Mortyburg is spared from destruction as it's detached from the rest of the station. A key element in the rise and fall of Evil Morty is his exploitation of the environment created by the Shadow Council, representative of the Citadel's inherent corporatism. And we don't mean corporate in the business sense. The show is portraying a conception of society as a single body, or corporation, from the Latin for body, corpus, where every part of the body must play a role, a government-defined one. Often associated with fascist societies, corporatism involves organizing society into corporations that are subordinate to the state. This system emphasizes the unity of different sectors and industries under a central authority, which is responsible for directing and controlling the overall direction of the economy.
So, what are we doing?
Stop asking questions. Stop doing meta commentary. Just have fun.
In many ways, the Shadow Council resembles the corporatist structure found in fascist regimes. In Germany, for example, this corporatism approach was known as Volksgemeinschaft. Yes, there were private companies, but in practice they had to follow the government's agenda. The fascist government sought to eliminate the idea of individuality instead pushing the narrative that society was an organism or body composed of parts that served a greater whole, effectively erasing the will of any person or people and replacing it with the will of the leader.
Daddy loves you. That's Daddy's good girl. Your life is a lie, man. All your lives are lies. Don't you get it? They told us we were special because we were Ricks, but they stripped us of everything that made us unique. We know how you feel. We're working stiff Ricks just like you, but our assembly line is justice.
Under corporatism, various sectors of society, such as industry, labor, and agriculture, are organized into corporations that work together under the guidance of a central authority. This hierarchical structure ensures that the state maintains control over all aspects of life. Just as, after the destruction of the original Council of Ricks, the Shadow Council emerges as a secretive ruling body that seeks to maintain control over the Citadel, and operates as a central authority that governs the city-state, managing the different groups of Ricks and Mortys, and ensuring their cooperation. And in both real-world corporatist societies and the Citadel of Ricks, the central authority seeks to maintain stability and order by suppressing dissent and controlling the population. The Shadow Council, much like the fascist governments that practice corporatism, enforces its authority through coercion and manipulation. It attempts to keep the population of Ricks and Mortys in line with its vision for the Citadel, maintaining a tight grip on power.
God damn it, when did this shit become the default?
One corporation in the Citadel, even, is a cookie factory that harvests simple Rick's happy memories and puts it into their wafers. This corporation, run by a member of the Shadow Council as a way to uphold its power, makes wafers that are a cynical metaphor that sells an impossible dream, analogous to the victory gin of Orwell's 1984, the embodiment of Roman poet Juvenal's line, "Give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt." Simple, easy pleasures that work to keep the Ricks and Mortys of the Citadel in a state of stuporous and controllable tranquility. The original destruction of the Citadel by Rick C-137 has far-reaching consequences. As the original governing body, the Council of Ricks, is dismantled, a power vacuum emerges, leaving the Shadow Council to assume control. In an attempt to rebuild and regain stability, the Citadel's residents try to implement a democratic system. However, this effort is ultimately undermined by a tendency toward populist ideologies, which lead to the establishment of Evil Morty's authoritarian regime. This development bears a striking resemblance to the Weimar Republic and other societies throughout history that have fallen prey to populism. Factors such as economic instability, social unrest and inequality, and a loss of faith in traditional institutions paved the way for populist leaders who promised to restore order and prosperity. Similarly, in the Citadel, the inhabitants find a charismatic leader to supposedly guide them through turbulent times and bring about hope and change. Tensions are clearly growing between the Citadel's Ricks and Mortys. While crony Ricks hold positions of power and influence, many find themselves in blue-collar jobs.
I see it in our factories, where Ricks work for a fraction of their boss's salary, even though they're identical and have the same IQ. The Citadel's problem isn't homeless Mortys or outraged Ricks. The Citadel's problem is the Ricks and Mortys feeding on the Citadel's death.
Holy shit!
Meanwhile, Mortys of the Citadel represent a brainwashed lower class, and the Citadel is even home to a slave class, mass-produced Morty clones that serve as sidekicks for Ricks, whose original Mortys had died. These clones are bred for forgiveness, possessing subservient traits that make them ideal companions. And as Mortytown devolves into an impoverished, crime and drug-ridden area, complete with corrupt cops, this dynamic leads many Mortys to feel marginalized and oppressed.
No Ricks, no families, high up their asses and running amok. Mortys are raised to be sidekicks. Without a side to kick, they just start kicking.
Furthermore, divisions among the Ricks themselves create an atmosphere of discord, as they're unable to agree on a unified vision for the Citadel.
A city of grandpas?
It's the Citadel of Ricks. All the different Ricks from all the different realities got together to hide here from the government.
But if every Rick hates the government, why would they hate Grandpa?
Because Ricks hate themselves the most.
It's this chaos that Evil Morty exploits to come to power. But the story of why this particular Morty becomes evil starts long before his campaign. When Rick Prime kills Rick C-137's original family, a cycle of violence begins in which our Rick rampages across the multiverse, killing every other Rick he can get his hands on in a quest to kill Rick Prime. This is what leads to the creation of the Citadel and Central Finite Curve. But by creating this seemingly ideal multiverse for Ricks, they also create an ideal prison for Mortys. While most Mortys are content there, especially the ones bred for forgiveness in the Citadel's cloning facility, exceptional Mortys, like Morty Prime and Evil Morty, feel trapped. And while our Morty confronts his Rick about the curve, Evil Morty becomes an oppressor to free himself from its oppression.
Do you know what the Central Finite Curve is? They built a wall around infinity. They separated all the infinite universes from all the infinite universes where he's the smartest man in the universe. Every version of us has spent every version of all of our lives in one infinite crib built around an infinite fucking baby. And I'm leaving it. That's what makes me evil. Being sick of him. If you've ever been sick of him, you've been evil too.
A clever and master manipulator, Evil Morty capitalizes on the Citadel's tension, inequality, and unrest. Although he's originally seen as a fringe, outsider candidate without much of a chance to win the presidency, he positions himself as the champion of the downtrodden, promising to bridge the divide between Ricks and Mortys.
But I've got a message for them. From the Ricks and Mortys keeping it alive. A message. From the Ricks and Mortys that believe in this Citadel to the Ricks and Mortys that don't. You're outnumbered.
His soaringly inspirational speech is tailored to maximize his appeal to voters. This tactic is explained by one thread of what's known as public choice theory, which broadly argues that during elections, candidates must maximize their appeal to voters, up to and including making grand promises they know they can't keep. But once the race is won, the winning candidate will no longer aim to appeal to voters. Instead, his or her goal will be to maximize power, because ultimately even seemingly pure-hearted politicians are motivated by their own private interests, just like the rest of us. And so Evil Morty cleverly targets the median voter, that is, the voter precisely in the middle of the electorate during his debate speech. He positions himself between the other seemingly extremist candidates, making himself the most appealing to the establishment in the process. And it works. By exploiting the power vacuum left by the destruction of the Citadel and the weaknesses of the Shadow Council, Evil Morty's populist message resonates with the Citadel's citizens. Propelled to victory in the presidential election, Evil Morty quickly takes control, and his goal, previously to appeal to voters, becomes to consolidate his power. He immediately purges much of the Shadow Council and other political opponents. The Citadel, once a shining city on the hill for Ricks, falls under the authoritarian rule of a populist leader.
This seems like a good time for a drink and a cold, calculated speech with sinister overtones. A speech about politics, about order, brotherhood, power. But speeches are for campaigning. Now is the time for action.
So that begs the question, what exactly is populism? And what similarities are there between Evil Morty and some of the real world's most brutal populist dictators? In political science, populism is the idea that society is separated into two groups at odds with one another: the pure people and the corrupt elite, or as Evil Morty ironically puts it,
The division I see is between the Ricks and Mortys that like the Citadel divided and the rest of us.
the true populist leader claims to represent the unified will of the people. For Evil Morty, that's the rest of us. Venezuelan populist dictator Hugo Chavez once said, "I am not an individual, I am the people." For Evil Morty, that's almost literally true. The society he seeks to control comprises many, many Mortys. The populist leader stands in opposition to an enemy, often embodied by some vague system or establishment, and aims to drain the swamp or tackle the elites. Chavez, who was in power from 1998 until his death in 2013, established a clear and constant other: imperialist foreign governments, especially the United States. Populist parties can be anywhere on the political spectrum. They don't fall into the traditional left-right dichotomy. A populist leader utilizes any doctrine that fits their agenda, and combines that doctrine with an anti-establishment campaign in order to gain power and support for their movement. One of the most defining characteristics of populist leaders is their charming personalities that can captivate audiences. And as strongmen who rise to power on the back of distrust in the established system, these leaders exploit the vulnerabilities of the population. A common tactic used by populist leaders is to divide the population into good and bad people, with the leader always supporting the interests of the good or pure group. Symbolism is another critical tool used by populists to gain the people's trust. They often adopt cultural elements to unify supporters and establish a clear distinction between themselves and the others whom the populist looks to rebel against. In the series, Mortys become the very symbol of subservience. This is not just a narrative. The Citadel's system is designed to depersonify Mortys, erasing the very traits that make Prime Morty and Evil Morty unique characters. Citadel Mortys are left to adopt the singular role of Rick-worshipping sidekick. This symbolism is so strong that less capable Ricks are seen as Mortys. They too are denied of their Rick traits.
Tomorrow you'll be transferred to your new Ricks. Hopefully, they will be your last. Yes, slow Rick, Tall Morty. Did I graduate this time yet? Anything's possible, Tall Morty. Ugh.
This is why supposedly inferior Ricks support Evil Morty. He understands this symbolism and exploits it. More than anything, a populist will identify the sources of tension in a society and pick at the scabs, worsening its wounds. Evil Morty picks at a real divide between the believers in the Citadel and the non-believers, and blows it out of proportion, just like Juan Perón in Argentina, Joseph McCarthy in the US, Francisco Franco in Spain, and many others throughout history. And so we return to assess Evil Morty, uniquely ruthless and intelligent among the many versions of Morty from across the multiverse. Once upon a time, he grew tired of the multiverse's Ricks and decided to take action. That action is a Rickicidal epidemic, a genocide, in addition to his murder of the crony capitalists who might dare contradict him or pose a threat to his power. We see personified on screen what we've seen in real life, in Germany, in Italy, in Venezuela, in Argentina, and in today's Russia. The list goes on. We see a fundamental truth that the most brutal regimes often get their starts in the best intentions of democracies. Evil Morty, after all, is democratically elected. But because even the smoothest talking, most charismatic politicians are ultimately human beings, their own private interests reside foremost in their hearts, and it's the tactics of populism: divide and conquer, become a man of the people, perpetuate crises and portray society as dysfunctional, then relentlessly pick at the wounds to create fear and hatred that allow them to consolidate power and go, as Evil Morty does, from fringe to populist candidate to brutal dictator. Yes, the Citadel we see in our very first encounter with it has problems, just as our own world does. But they're not as fundamental, as drastic, or as clear-cut as Evil Morty depicts. And no, neither Evil Morty nor any real-life politician or politician's policy can ride in on a white knight and magically solve them. As the show asserts in nearly every episode, Rick's desire for freedom can drive the creation of fantastical things, though that rebelliousness can also be a source for evil. But ultimately, the strivings of people like Rick C-137 to invent, create, and build remain our best bet to solve the problems our world faces.
Yes, I did it! There is no God in your face! One dot, motherfucker! Yes! Yeah!
Oh, yes!
Woo!
Yes!
All right! You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, that was a close call.
Yeah! I'm gonna do the Cabbage Patch,
yeah.
Morty.
Do it.
Check me out. I'm
Do
doing
it,
the Cabbage
Rick.
Patch
Do it
dance.
right.
I'm doing it too.
Do the Cabbage
Classic
Patch.
dance, remember?
We're doing
Look
the
at
Cabbage
this.
Do it. Do the
Oh,
dance.
shit.